Welcome back, everybody, to the Thrivestry Podcast, Mastering the Art of Thriving at Life. This is your host, Jeremy Jones, and this is my co-host, Gigi.
Hi.
Usually I say hi, Gigi. Dang it. All right, everybody. Today we're going to talk about our two topics are going to be, the first one's going to be triggers. Like, are you triggered? No, it's going to be habit triggers and bad habits and good habit triggers. And it's why it's one of the most important things we can think about when it comes to creating change in our lives and the world around us. And there's also a really interesting study that is not a big surprise, but it's an example of a greater problem. And the study was about how teenagers who drink diet sodas actually consume more calories than teenagers who drink regular sodas, which was really fascinating to see it in a study. And then what does that mean for diet foods in general? But let's talk about what a trigger is. And so in The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, he talks about the habit loop. And usually we're going through our day and we just follow routines. Routines are what we do, so we don't have to use extra mental energy to think about what we're going to do. We try to be organized with all of our clothes in one place, so we're not like scrambling around trying to find what to wear that day. We usually we keep our toothbrush in the same place. It's like and there's the trigger is, we get up and we do this thing and there's a trigger and then we follow through this routine, this loop. It's a trigger, habit, and then reward, right? And then we can keep that loop going. And this is where bad habits.
Is it an example? If I were to give an example that like I prep my coffee pot at night and then in the morning I press the switch and that's the trigger or that's the work or whatever, and then my reward is that I get coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Or the trigger might just be that you go home, you go downstairs or whatever, and that you automatically, it's the first thing you do, because it's there. And that the trigger is you walk downstairs, and even if you're like super out of it, you're like, I know what I need to do, so I get my coffee. Exactly. But so one of the ways that we can create new habits or avoid bad habits is to pay attention to the triggers. And so a lot of times, one of the easiest things to start with is not trying to change your behaviors, but notice the trigger that happened. So, if you're somebody who always needs like sweets at night, so it's like you had a healthy dinner, you had a good day, and an hour or two later, you're watching TV, and then you're like, oh, I need something, and you go get some ice cream, or you go, you eat the bag of chips or whatever. And so instead of like trying to fight it, because then that's really hard to do. Excuse me. What you can do is just observe and say, "Whoa, yeah, that is weird. I'm craving that. What was I doing right before this that made me crave this right now? And what thoughts was I having? What emotions was I having? What things triggered it? It could be commercials on TV. It could be that you're hungry. Maybe you didn't eat enough for dinner. Maybe it's that you're staying up late, and the later you stay up, the more the body starts craving food again. Because when you're staying up late at night, your body's predicting that you're not getting enough sleep, and you probably aren't. And so it tends to promote the hormones that make you hungry because it's trying to deal with extra stress, right? So one of the ways the body knows, like if I'm being stressed out, it wants you to eat more food so you're not having to deal with starving. And so you can just observe and then say, okay, that's really interesting. And then you can say, okay, what can I do to prevent this trigger? Could I eat more food for dinner? Could I go to bed earlier? Can I remove those bad foods completely so I don't have to use willpower to fight it? And then if you can reinforce the new habit, so instead of saying, I'm going to have this ice cream or these chips, you might say, I'm going to have a piece of fruit instead. So you replace it with something else, and you find some other positive habit. And what I really liked about something I read recently was talking about how you can replace those negative, those bad habits with good habits by using the same triggers, So for example, if you're at work or whatever, and like you always treat yourself to some candy at certain times of the day, late morning or early afternoon, and you're like, oh, I'm going to get up and go get my piece of candy. And then it's like, well, why am I doing this? And there's this trigger. Okay, like I want my candy. What do I really want? Well, I really just want a break from my computer. I need a break from this environment, and I want some kind of reward. And you're like, okay, instead I'm going to do some push-ups and some squats, or I'm going to go for a walk around the block, or I'm going to go have, I'm just going to go to the water and get a thing of water, and try to use that trigger to change your behavior. and eventually you won't have that same craving anymore because you've made a different choice. And so I think one of the big thing I wanted to point out was that we're always being triggered in all these different avenues. And if we can recognize our triggers, this first thing is just observing yourself, not necessarily trying to change it right away, but just observing the triggers. And then we can start making a plan for, I have this trigger, and then what can I do? What are my backup plans, right? So I really want to go, have that beer or whatever. You can say, okay, here's what I'm going to do instead. When I'm going to not have the beer for 30 minutes, and if I still want it, I'm going to have it. Like some sort of coping strategy that if you plan that stuff ahead of time, research shows that you're going to be a lot more successful. So think about the triggers in your life. What sort of triggers for bad habits might you have, Gigi, or have you talked to people about?
Oh, the stay up late is a big one for me. Definitely. If I like to be like in bed by like 9:30 and sleep by 10 or 10:30, and which is a problem because I do get carried away with reading a lot of the time, and I sometimes don't fall asleep until like midnight because I am too much into a book. But if I'm in bed, then I can stay up later than if I'm hanging out downstairs. Like if I'm hanging out downstairs watching TV, then it's like, oh, okay, it's been like I'm hungry again, and then you want like a snack or a second round of dinner or like whatever it is. And we don't eat junk food, so there's no junk food in my house. But it ends up being then like, okay, so I'm gonna have like some of the leftover steak and salad from dinner. Well, that's like a whole other meal, right? And if you identify, like for me, that was a big thing, like identifying, oh, because I'm staying up late and I'm in the kitchen, because it's like our main floor is all open, right? So I'm going to get something to eat. If I go to bed, even if I'm not going to sleep earlier, but I'm in bed, I'm not going to get up and go get something. That was a big thing for me.
And I think that's really
brush your teeth after dinner.
Yeah, I like that one. That's a way to again not want to eat because you already brushed your teeth. I do think it's really common for parents, especially because you're working and you're doing all this stuff, and then you have to deal with your kids and getting them fed and put to bed and everything, and then it's like me time. It's the time to spend relaxing or whatever, and then we end up pushing that time out because you think you're relaxing and resting when you're watching TV, for example, or like when you're reading, but a lot of times that just ends up turning into hours of time spent when you're not getting the same amount of relaxation and downtime that you thought you were. So then, you put your kids to bed at 8 or 9, and then you stay up till, midnight because you want me time.
That actually got to be a really bad problem for me because like I'm a single mom, right? Which means that it's kind of the worst of both worlds. And not that I love my life, but so when you're a parent, someone has to stay home with the kids, right? And when you're single, you don't have any company. So if you're single and you don't have kids, you can go out at night and you can have hobbies. You can go do yoga or be on a swim team, or you could go do painting or whatever. But when you have kids and you're single, you're at home by yourself every single night. You can't leave because you have responsibilities at home, but you also don't have any company. So you end up doing just things that you can do by yourself, day in and day out, day after day after day. And it's boring as fuck. And so it got to the point where I was actually, because these triggers kept coming up, and I would just be endlessly surfing on Netflix and watching this and watching that. And I don't even really like to watch TV, but it was just a go-to. And it got to the point where it would be midnight or 1. And by this point I've had a big snack or a second round of dinner, and I'm not sleeping properly and I can't wake up in the morning. And it was just why? To do what? To hang out by myself watching stuff that I don't even want to watch. Right? And I think that so many people get trapped in that, right? And it's that trigger of okay, after I put the kids to bed, I'm going to go downstairs and do the dishes, and I'm going to sit down on the couch, right? And that's a very normal cycle for people, right? And the trigger was sitting down on the couch, right? And as soon as I kind of identified that, and I was so now I go downstairs, clean the kitchen, and then I just go right back upstairs. And that has made a big difference. And now I go to sleep, I get more sleep. I'm not staying up. I'm not on the screen as much. And, you're in my world where we work online. So we're always on screens, and like I don't want to add to that by watching more TV. But anyway, now I'm just rambling.
Well, and the screens was something to touch on too, right? Is now most of our recreation when we're at home before bed is involving screens, whether it's TV or our phones, and we're scrolling. And especially you guys who are gym owners or coaches, a lot of times a lot of your work is on there, so you're not even getting away from work. So you're trying to relax, but now you end up looking at clients' posts, and you're responding to people, and you're doing these things that end up being work based, which is not going to make you relax and want to go to sleep, and may stress you out. And then the light, right? So we know that blue light, especially from screens, and that screen, the closer it is to your face, the more you're absorbing, especially through your eyes, prevents you from producing melatonin. And melatonin is the thing that makes you sleepy, right? So our melatonin peaks in the evening around sunset, as long as you don't have lights on you. And that's what that gets your body prepared for sleep. It's also a really powerful antioxidant, so it's good for preventing cancer. And so, having that recreation, even if you aren't working, is still keeping you up. So that's why they have the orange filters on your phone. You can wear orange glasses or whatever, but ultimately those are just Band-Aids. If you can read a book and try to use more incandescent lights, not fluorescent or LED lights in your rooms before bed, that's going to help you fall asleep faster, and sleep better too. The quality of your sleep will increase if you do that.
I have a question about LEDs. If it's like behind a lampshade, does it matter what kind of light bulb it is?
No, most LEDs put out the lightest bright light they can, and so it's even if it's in your fixtures and everything else, it's still too much white. They make some LEDs that are more warmer hues that you can try to get, or you can change the hue of the light, and that can be better. But in general, it's because of the way they design the diodes, and so it still puts out a lot of the white, which is all colors, which has a lot of blue and green spectrum, which tend to again tell your body. It's like imagine being in a cave and you have this hole to the outside world, and it's a bright and sunny day, and you're like staring at it right here in front of your face. It's like you're not going to trick your body. It's nighttime. Your body thinks it's daytime.
Okay, what are some other triggers that don't involve sleep then? Because I have a lot. Like before I go to bed, if I want to have a glass of wine or a beer, then it's like, okay, if I have tea instead, then that's like a replacement thing, right? But all of those have to do with like going to bed and nighttime. What are some stuff that you have that's during the day?
It could be like you're going to the gym in the morning, first thing in the morning. So you set up your routine so that you have a trigger that like, okay, I'm going to put my gym bag in the car or whatever, so that I know that, okay, I'm going to the gym today, and you set that intention. Another one that's really good is scheduling your attendance ahead of time. So registering for the class a day or two in advance. So you set that intention. In general, one of the things I read about recently too was it's really good to log your food before you eat it, right? So like if you're trying to track your food, especially, or any habit, if you're tracking your habit, you actually write down that you did it before you actually do it. So right before you do it, or earlier in the day, you say that you did it, and you're setting that intention, and you're much more likely to follow through. So those are triggers that you're setting up. You're deliberately making a trigger. Like, I'm going to put my gym bag in my car, so I'm going to the gym today, and then when you're driving home, maybe take it out of the trunk or whatever and put it in the passenger seat, so you're driving home. Or another one is like, if you're leaving work, you always go drive past the gym, even if it takes a little bit longer to get home, and then that way you're like not really feeling it, and you're not really, but you still drive right past it or pull in the parking lot, and you really have to not want to go to the gym that day. And but you don't allow yourself to go straight home. You always go past the gym, and then because usually what happens is you'll pull in the parking lot and be like, I'll go in for 10 minutes and just mobilize, or just go do something fast. Like that's you're setting up that deliberate trigger, so that you go to the gym versus like going home.
Yep, I like all those things. Or like carrying around a water bottle,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's a really good one. Like most people don't drink enough water. But if you have a water bottle in your purse or in your car or whatever, and you just keep it full, then you're going to drink a lot more water because you just have water on you, right?
Yeah. Another one is, I think for a lot of people, the snack foods in the cabinet or like the drinks in the fridge, you open the fridge, it's there. So you come home, you open the fridge, it's there. You come downstairs or you come into your kitchen and in the snacks there. And so now you have to actively not do it, which again takes willpower and it's hard. If you take those things that you're trying to avoid and you get them out of sight, put them in the garage in like a big Tupperware container and put another Tupperware container on top of it, you don't think about it and you're like, oh, it'd be a pain to go get it. If I really want it, I can, but it's a real pain to go get. I know somebody who's saying that they would always buy like a candy bar, right? And the whole idea is, a piece of candy, a little sliver of chocolate bar is fine every day. It's not everybody should be able to have that in their diet, but she was saying that she eats the whole thing, and it always starts with one, then two, and then the whole candy bar is gone. And then like the next day she buys another candy bar going like, okay, I'm only going to eat one at a time. And then she's the whole thing. And then she's like, okay, you know what? Now I just buy one serving at a time. Right. And so I go to the store and I'll buy one truffle. I'll buy one thing. And then I go and I eat it and that's it. And I'm not going to go back down to the store to get another one, and so.
Then you have different problems.
Well, and again, that's a flag to say like, what's going on? Why am I triggered like this? Why do I, why is that craving so strong? So those are ways, again, we can use triggers to pay attention to what's going on with because ultimately it's about what's really going on inside of our brains. And we use a little bit of mental energy to figure that out. And then we deliberately set up our environments so that the triggers are triggering us toward the positive. Cool. Let's talk about this article and let me see if I can get my share going so you guys can see this. So this was, where's the headline? Drinking diet soda may make you gain weight, study suggests. And there's been a lot of studies that talk about this. And just real quick, it's not anything real groundbreaking if you guys work in the fitness and nutrition realm. But basically they took like 7,000 kids, they were teenagers. And they said that in the from 1999 to 2012, artificial sweeteners have jumped up 200%. The consumption has jumped up 200%. And they had these kids track their foods, and they had three groups. They had a group or four groups. They had water, people that just drank water only for the most part, and then they had people who did all the diet drinks, artificially sweetened, and then they had the ones that just drank regular sodas and full calorie drinks, and they had people who did both. And so they said that kids who drank diet soda consumed an extra 196 calories per day. So they're drinking sodas that have virtually no calories, but they made up for it by eating other things. And we can speculate at what's the physiological mechanism going around this. We know that sweeteners can still raise your insulin, which when your insulin's high, then you end up getting hunger cravings because your body's looking for more sugar to put away, so it makes you crave sweets. But this is exact evidence of something like that happening. So they're eating an extra 200 calories per day than the kids who drank water, even though they were only drinking diet sodas. The kids who drank sugary sodas consumed an extra 312 calories per day. And kind of one of the most telling things is kids that drank both diet and regular drinks consumed an extra 450 calories per day compared to, water drinkers. And, we know most people, probably teenagers, should be in that 1,500 to 2,000 calorie range, maybe a little bit more if they're really active. But, a 2,000 calorie diet, 450 calories is like 25% more calories than a kid who was just drinking water, right? And those are the kids who did
like both. Over a week, that's a pound of calories, right? Like a pound is 3,500 calories. If you add an extra 500 a day, that's literally an extra pound a week just from drinks. Yeah.
And we know that these calories usually are the carbohydrate variety and a very insulin related variety, which a lot of research shows tends to promote more body fat gain than a lot of other calories. So again, like Gigi and I were talking about this beforehand, and she's kind of like, well, that's such a simple thing. Like, yeah, duh, don't drink sodas.
Just drink water. Like that's all. Milk, juice, pop, like all of that stuff is like not necessary. Just drink water. Like it's
yeah.
I don't know. And then it's like you said, like if you work in the fitness industry, this is like duh. Like we've been saying this for 30 years,
mm-hmm.
But I've been saying it since I was 4 at least, right? For 30 years. But
yeah. But so what's interesting though, or what this made me think of is this is just another example of these drinks are called diet, Like that's purely what they're for. It's supposedly for weight loss and weight management, and they're supposed to be better alternatives than the regular drinks. And yet we see this evidence that shows it doesn't, it actually is worse, right? Or at least it's definitely still worse than drinking non-calorie, non-calorie, non-sweetened beverages. And you know, we think about our society and how we continue to set things up, and someone comes up with a new solution that is then marketed to everybody to be a fix. And ultimately, we always want to go back to sort of that ancestral model to say, like, okay, you know, how is the human animal supposed to live, and how does this fit into that equation? You know, and so the human animal didn't have artificial sweeteners. And it's not saying that something new that comes along is bad, but it does make, you do always want to have that lens, and you want to be very careful with your recommendations and how you might change your behaviors based upon this new thing that's come along.
Yeah, and we're seeing it now. Like diet pops are a great example. But the other one that always comes to my mind is the war on fat, right? Like, and yogurt is the thing for me that stands out the most. Is like the concept of fat-free yogurt just blows my mind, because it's like, number one, the amount of chemicals and processing that you have to add to yogurt to remove the fat is like mind-blowing. And number two, then you have to add in a whole bunch of sugar to make it taste any good at all, because it's the fat in the yogurt that makes it taste good. So now you've got basically like a tub of chemicals and sugar. And like at that point, there's nothing good for you in fat-free yogurt, right? But it was the fat, right? At the time, it was, you know, fat is bad. Fat makes us sick. Fat on our bodies makes us sick, so we shouldn't eat fat. And now we're feeling the repercussions of 40 years of the war on fat, right? Where our bodies are just full of chemicals and sugar and like all kinds of stuff, right? And where would we be if we had gone through that, right?
Well, and you know, I think part of what contributed to the fat hypothesis was the fact that people think of fat like oils and greases and how they clog your drains, right? And they think that like, oh, you know, if I pour hot grease in my drain at home, it's going to clog and I'm going to have a clogged pipe. And they say, well, you know, fat clogs your arteries just like it does your pipes. And people make that visualization, that concept is not true. You know, it was something that people started saying, and it sort of makes sense, you know, from a like, oh yeah, I've had clogged pipes before. I see what grease looks like when it's cold. And it's like, and so that's what clogs your arteries. And then when they go and they clean out people's arteries, you know, they've shown that a lot of that stuff isn't what's really going on, you know, and it's much more complicated and nuanced than that. And that's just another example of kind of science trying to like chase down this problem and going off on this long tangent when there's ultimately something else going on, and why we need to look at studies and research, and listen to people who have a better understanding, and always taking it from a like, well, how does this apply to me and my lifestyle and my experiences and what my ancestors experienced, and realize that there's probably never going to be any major, you know, like quick fixes or major shifts in what, you know, and what people are being prescribed or told what to do. That's all
right. Well,
well, I was gonna say it's always a red flag when someone has like, this is the newest, greatest thing ever. It's going to change your life, and it's so much better. And this, you know, and that's the clickbaity headlines that we see every day, right? Is the, you know, the news sites, they're trying to get eyeballs, so they're always creating headlines, and they take the research and they find some weird little thing that says like tequila makes you live longer, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna click on that. You know, or oh, this one thing is gonna kill you, you know, like, oh, you're gonna die if you do this, and it's like, well, let's back up a little bit and figure it out. And I think sometimes it's really hard to find the signal through the noise, right? And there's so much noise out there now. And one of the ways is to stop triggering yourself to look at your phone every night. The less noise you're getting, the better the signal is going to be, and the better your life's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Just all right. Right.
Yep. Well, that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. Figure out what triggers you have and why you're being triggered, and if you can remove that trigger or replace it with something beneficial and healthy. And don't drink artificial sweeteners. I think that's it.
Bye. Bye.